Today, we are going to be discussing guided reading and how we approach it here at North Wheatley Primary School, with a special emphasis on how we use the Vipers approach. What makes a good reading lesson? Now, as we can see, there are many different elements that make up a good guided reading session. It includes so many different components, from visualising right down to reading for pleasure. But we are going to focus on these bottom 6 skills in particular. They include vocabulary, inference and inferring, predicting, explaining, retrieval, summarising. These 6 elements combine to make our Viper skills, which we are making our class focus throughout school. In this video, I hope to address how Vipers link to objectives, looking at what we want children to learn and how we teach it here at North Wheatley Primary. Throughout school, we try to ensure that all teaching follows the same learning structure, with opportunities for pre-teach, recap of learning, new reading, new skills, practice, application, and review. Children are explicitly taught the skills of reading through the use of Vipers. These are used in both Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2, with very little differences between. In Key Stage 1, the S in the Vipers stands for sequencing, whereas in Key Stage 2, this is a summarising skill. In Key Stage 1, also the E, the explain, is not one of the content domains, and rather it asks children to know why they've come to conclusions and explain their preferences. However, in Key Stage 1, it covers one of the content domains, as you will see later. As you can see here, we've got the content domains from Key Stage 1, and you can see each of the elements that children need to learn match one of the Viper skills perfectly. This can also be seen in the Key Stage 1 English Reading Test Framework. As we can see here, vocabulary relates to 20% of the marks, identifying and explaining the sequence is 8%, inferences 35%, but we have such a high percentage in retrieval of 8%, and this is why we base a lot of our reading around that in Key Stage 1. We're now going to use this opportunity to look at each of the Viper's skills individually, and we're going to start with vocabulary. Now, as I mentioned previously, vocabulary is a huge part of a reading paper. In Key Stage 2, it can make over 25%. And children will use these vocabulary skills in a lesson to gain a greater understanding of vocabulary in a variety of ways. This can include synonyms and antonyms, so the words that are similar and the words that are opposite, finding words closest in meaning to another, finding alternate words, being able to define words, find and copy questions, and multiple choice. And you can see an example here. Why do you think Roald Dahl uses the word blister to describe some of the children? What does he mean by this? Define adoration. How would a nimble mind work? Define hankering. We can see that in these questions, the children need to have a true understanding of all the different aspects of vocabulary to really answer these questions correctly. Inferring is a vital skill which is responsible for an average of 38% of marks on a Key Stage 2 reading paper. And what inference means is making inferences from the text to explain and justify with evidence. This skill requires children to pick up ideas from the text that are not always written in the text itself. And we do this in school by getting to read the text as if they're a detective. They're not looking for what is there, they're looking for what is meant by it. So for example, if the text said Jenny's face was red and she wrinkled her brow and began to shout, what would the children infer about what Jenny feels? Question examples include: how could you tell the Wormwoods don't care for Matilda? Why wouldn't Mr. Wormwood buy Matilda a book? Why would Mrs. Phelps have been taken aback by Matilda? Why does Mrs. Phelps keep asking Matilda about pictures? And why does Matilda start going to the library less? This skill is explored during our class story sessions. We expect children to predict what might happen from details stated and implied. Here, children are required to make logical and reasonable guesses about what could happen next, and they achieve this by looking at what's already happened, what the characters might have hinted at, or what has been applied by the author's use of language. An example could be, if someone has brought a cake lit with candles to a birthday party, what would logically happen next? A question example could be, predict what else might happen to Matilda in the story. As previously mentioned, the retrieval skill, again, is vital when it comes to reading. Children need to find key pieces of information within a text, and they do this by looking at the text for specific answers. The answer that they're looking for is always in the text somewhere. They just have to find and retrieve it using skimming and scanning techniques. Examples include: who does Roll say bears the most brunt of parental adoration? What are Matilda's parents called? Where did Matilda go for books? What book did Mrs. Phelps give to Matilda? And how does Matilda make hot chocolate? Explain questions are where children apply what they know from the text, and this can include quotes and evidence to back up their opinion. These questions are often seen in exams as 3-mark questions, as children are expected to include a point, evidence, and explain their answer. Question examples include: What is Dal trying to say in the first 3 paragraphs, and how does Dal make it funny? When practicing this skill, children must sum up what they have read, and they do this by reading the text, picking out the key points that are really important, and giving a quick rundown of the text's main ideas. A good way to think of it is if they imagine they're reading a book and they have to tell their friends the plot. What key parts would they love to tell them, and what would they leave out? Question examples include: choose one word to describe Matilda and explain your choice, and do the same for Mrs. Phelps. So how do we apply this in the classroom? In Key Stage 2, on Monday to Thursday, we practice these skills, building up from retrieval on Monday all the way to Thursday, using the same text so children can really embed their knowledge. In Key Stage 1, we apply a carousel approach, where children have the opportunity to revise each skill once per week, with a major emphasis placed on retrieval skills, and the summary session reverts to a sequencing session. During a typical session, the teacher will share which skill the children will be focusing on that day. Teachers will carefully select up to 4 key vocabulary words they want the children to learn that week. And these will be taught and embedded throughout the rest of the week using Viper skills. We will also allow children to use these words in different contexts, and where appropriate, they will be applied during literacy sessions. During these sessions, teachers cover fiction, non-fiction, poetry, songs, picture books, and short films to allow access to a wide variety of texts. These text types are appropriate to the age and the key stage of the children. Children will read during these sessions in a variety of ways. They will hear the teacher model reading. They might read individually, in pairs, in groups, and reading aloud to their peers. Teachers plan 3 key questions each session based on the skill being focused on. Children are encouraged to orally speak their answer before writing anything down, and they know their first answer may not always be their best to help build resilience. We use a maximum of 3 questions each session to ensure children have the time to provide a quality answer, and at times children are given sentence stems and vocabulary that's expected to be used. Children are encouraged to provide evidence for their answers based on the text extract or picture, and they are encouraged to use evidence from a range of different places within the text. As previously mentioned, we encourage children to talk orally through their answers to ensure it's the best they can be before writing anything down. And we also acknowledge it's good for the children to be able to formally record an answer. Children can do this in a variety of ways, such as discussing the answer first with peers, working individually, or orally discussing before writing down. During our reading sessions, teachers focus on specific children. They might hear them read individually, in pairs or groups, or within a group, and teachers can then assess the children based on the national curriculum expectations.